Um, so today we just want to kind of go over the opportunity for our new applied data analytics training program focused on K-12 and beyond, where we're focused on leveraging SLDS systems to understand longer term outcomes. A little bit of housekeeping real quick as we move to the next slide. Just want to welcome you all. I'm Nate Barrett, Vice President of Programs and Development at Coleridge Initiative. I'll be joined by Ben Feeder, who's Director of our training program, and Stephanie Walsh, who is the Associate Director at the Hildreth Center Workforce, or the State Longitudinal. I always forget. Sorry, Stephanie. But real quick on housekeeping, our Q&A, if you have questions throughout, just pop them into the Q&A part, and we'll take care of all the questions at the end to make sure we cover everything that might still be unknown for you all, so you kind of know what the expectations are and what you're getting into. So I think it's natural to think about as we head into this is, Ben, if you want to jump to the next slide, is to think, okay, well, why are we doing this? So just to take a step back and to kind of put this into bigger context. So, when I think about K-12 education, when I think about education, more broadly, it's a cumulative process, right? Is every year that you attend is stacking on prior knowledge and building out more knowledge, right? And so when I think about K-12 specifically in this endeavor, it's the foundation upon which all future human capital development is done, and deployment, and ultimately into the workforce. And I think many of you here are well versed in that there's a lot of K-12 research out there, but I think there's some debate on things, right? And not everything's settled. As with any research, it seems like for every question we answer, we generate 2 or 3 more. And there's always disagreement among findings, and some of it's because studies aren't always generalizable. We worry about the way the methods and the data that folks have available to ask and answer important questions. But although it's extensive, we need to understand more about these K-12 experiences, both within schools, outside of schools, that are ultimately going to affect these longer term outcomes. And so it's helpful and reasonable to say, well, what do we know, or sort of where are the consistent gaps? Well, I think it's pretty clear in the research that we know teachers matter. They're the most important school level resource, but there's not a lot of clarity, although we can measure and say that teacher specifically had a positive impact on their students' growth. We don't always know the way in which they were able to do that. And we don't always know the trade-offs, because we know that certain characteristics of teachers might matter more than others. And so we don't always understand the trade-offs and the limits of what ways that teachers can matter, because ultimately, when we think about the impact schools generally have on children and their longer-term outcomes, we're talking about typically anywhere from 50 to 60% of the variance we see in outcomes attributed to schools. And of that, typically somewhere around the same percentage attributed to teachers within those schools. So we know there's other things that are important. So what are those? So we know expenditures matter, but you get the economist answer of, well, it depends, right? So the Hanyu-Sheks of the world will say that expenditures don't matter. You have the Kirby-Jacksons of the world that say, well, actually, they really do matter. And a lot of this debate then centers around not so much the magnitude of resources and the expenditures that are occurring, but how they're occurring, in what ways, and what are we spending dollars on. We also know that one of those is expenditures is facilities, and facilities matter, right? Do you have a good building? Is it well maintained? But there's an endogeneity problem there, because we know that a lot of schools that are under-resourced typically have poor facilities, but they know they also serve typically underserved communities. And so there's a lot of things still to understand here. And in this context, we're thinking at the same time, states have moved light years in the past 20 years on integrated data systems that go well beyond K-12 and can start to actually speak to some of these longer-term outcomes. And certainly, there are improvements to be made in these infrastructures, but it provides that foundation from which we can start to ask and answer deeper questions about these longer term outcomes for individuals, for kids that we serve. And to be clear, this is one of our largest public investments that we make as a country, is in K-12 education and education more broadly. And when we were talking about that magnitude of investments, and it's not lost on me that certainly, not to politicize it, but certainly there's downsizing on the federal side on what that can look like, what role states and local governments will now play that might be different to fill in for some of those gaps that may exist from federal funding. It's really important to have this infrastructure so that states and new initiatives are enacted where evaluation is going to be necessary. we have to have this data system that not only exists, but we know how to use it. Because I could be an expert in K-12 data and not know as much about workforce data. How does it all fit together? And vice versa, right? And I think we need to start thinking more broadly about getting away from our siloed approach of, well, we're focused on K-12 issues when they very much have an impact downstream into the human capital deployment in workforce. And so what we're trying to do here, the opportunity is to bring folks together to solve complicated policy issues together, because people and data cross agency boundaries. And I think our efforts, our research should as well. So in that context and that opportunity, Ben, if you want to jump to the next slide, in that context and opportunity, it's thinking about how do we get here? Well, we sort of articulated that same story and narrative to the Walton Family Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we partnered with the state of New Jersey, particularly Stephanie, who's been incredibly helpful in the development of this, to be able to ask and answer these questions, but provide the access to micro level data for you guys to learn how these systems work together to be able to execute a pilot project. And with that, I just wanted to kind of kick it over to Stephanie to get her thoughts on the engagement more generally.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Walsh. I am an assistant director at the Heldrick Center and the director of the New Jersey Statewide Data System. And I appreciate all of you being here and your interest in this training. So we are huge fans of Coleridge and the Applied Data Analytics courses. Our staff and our collaborators at other agencies within the state have benefited so much from these training programs in the past, going back to 2020. So for the opportunity for us to get to contribute to some of that and get the benefit of some of you looking at our data and exploring these topics is really, really exciting for us. So as brief background, New Jersey's longitudinal data system has been in development for 10 to 12 years now, and a lot of that time has been on the infrastructure and the governance. And we're at this point finally where we're able to use the data, like Nate was mentioning, on these really important research questions that have come up in the state, but our team is fairly small, our capacity is fairly limited. So having this opportunity for the folks in this training program to learn how to use this data, to understand how it works, to be able to see longitudinal data in this environment, that might spark some interest in how they're using the data in their own state or answering these really important questions is going to be so important for the next stage of research in this area. And again, really looking at that linked K through 12 aspect. A lot of the work has focused on higher education and the workforce. So really taking that step back to these K-12 outcomes, and that really longitudinal look at outcomes is important to us. So New Jersey, is a wonderful state. We have really great agency partners, and they're all really excited to engage with this and be a part of the process. So really looking forward to hopefully working with all of you in this training and seeing what comes out of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. And now I think, Ben, you're up, and we're going to get a little bit more in the details of the applied data analytics training and the course more specifically.
Yep. Hello and welcome, and thanks, Nate. Thanks, Stephanie. Just some backgrounds on the Coleridge Initiative. First, for those that this might be your first introduction to who we are. So our mission is in bold at the top, but I'll read it aloud. It's to build capacity in government agencies to empower a better use of administrative data to inform decision-making and advance the fields of evidence-based policy for the public good. And we have a suite of applied data analytics training programs. Of course, y'all are here for the specific K through 12 ones, and they really help. And we believe that they firmly help drive and advance our mission. But we wouldn't be able to do that without our secure research platform, that where we are authorized to store and develop project workspaces and working with confidential data. It's the Administrative Data Research Facility. I may refer to it as the ADRF, but I'll do my best to avoid the acronyms here. But you could just, if you're not familiar, you can think about it as a secure remote access research facility. We also have a variety of other products and work streams that we have there. Just a few of them are listed below. A lot of them involve collaboratives working not just with states, but other research partners in the space, other nonprofits, other administering organizations that we're extremely fortunate to work with to add to some of those network effects at the Coleridge Initiative. And so just more specifically about the Applied Data Analytics training program. So you can see the fancy animation on the right-hand side of the screen there. That just shows some of the growth of our training programs over time. So our first official Applied Data Analytics training program took place in 2017. Since then, we have expanded quite a bit 8 years later. I think we're now at around, with this, we'll hopefully get to a little over 1,300 total participants. Maybe we'll hit that 400 unique organization mark, but you can see that we've spread and grown over time across a variety of states. We also have trainings that we've done at the federal level and also for local government agency employees as well. The intention, though, throughout all of our applied data analytics training programs is really on that first A, or when we say ADA, so that applied portion. We want this experience to be as useful and as applied as possible to your day-to-day work. We understand that you only have so much time to be able to devote to an initiative like this. And so we want to make sure that we can maximize effectively that bang for your buck. And so in doing so, we're not just, our trainings aren't just around data science concepts or analytic concepts, but it's really around using restricted use microdata. So in this case, we're fortunate enough to use and leverage the New Jersey Statewide Data System accessed in our secure research facility, the ADRF. And we'll use that to develop all of the course materials. They'll all be applied to the specific linked K-12 data system. We have our trainings across a variety of domains. Traditionally, we've actually had a lot of training programs. We did a training program with New Jersey in 2021 on post-secondary to workforce. We've had a lot of training programs on post-secondary to workforce, so we're really excited to be able to sort of expand our reach into the K-12 sphere as well, because we understand that a lot of the policy questions don't just start at the post-secondary level, but we want to go back even further. And so we're going to be working with messy data. We're going to be working with administrative data. And as part of the training program, we want you to learn by doing. So in that, we will, and I guess I can go to the next slide. Really, the core of the training program is the team time. So we'll split you all up into teams, or we'll actually, in this case, ask you to apply in project teams. And as part of the core of the class, we will spend the first hour introducing some applied concepts, such as cohort analysis, record linkage. I'll get into that in a little bit. But the second part of the class is really around the team project. So you'll have an opportunity to work in your teams and apply these concepts to specific research questions using the New Jersey data, but that might be most relevant to your state, to your agency, or to your organization. We really try and think about this not just also as a project that's contained within the scope of the Applied Data Analytics training program, but we're thinking about these projects transitioning into products and then transitioning into practice to really affect that evidence-based decision-making chain, or that theory of change. So as part of this training program, we're going to start with two overarching questions. Notice that they're very broad, and the intention here is we're effectively providing some guardrails. We need the questions to be, and the projects to be focused on realm of K-12 educational pathways into workforce and post-secondary programs and other training programs. But our questions are intentionally broad, so then you can take specific aspects and pieces that are most relevant to your organizations and ask those questions using the New Jersey data. So our two questions that are really driving the training here are students graduating from high school on time and successfully transitioning into further education, training, or employment? And do students and families have access to adequate public supports and neighborhood conditions to enable them to success academically and in the workforce? Now, just to get into, I guess, a bit more details about the structure of the training program, just in general. So we start with the foundations pre-training module. I think the larger term is the foundations of data and technical literacy module. That is our fancy name for it. But in practice, it's 4 self-paced units introducing key data literacy and technical concepts. It's more, you could think about it kind of like an office hours or a lab portion of like a traditional college class where you will have the materials. They're already posted on our website. They introduce what we call fundamental data operations. And the way we like to think about them as fundamental data operations, because then we think that you can kind of translate them across different languages. Here we'll introduce R, we'll introduce SQL to those that aren't familiar, but to those that are familiar, then there might be some more concepts around data literacy, around project scoping, or just making sure that we're speaking the same language. So then once we start working with the New Jersey data in the following module and really that core of the class, we're all speaking the same language, and then we can really hone in on specific K-12 concepts in the context of our data. I will also mention, I just reminded myself completely separately, we are recording, as you may have noticed here. Our intention is to post the recording on our class website afterwards. And for those that couldn't make it but were registered for the webinar, we'll also follow up with a separate email to them with the website, and we'll blast this out separately. We'll also have these slides will be made available and posted publicly in case you want to go back. So there's no need to take any notes if you don't want to. And then really the crux of the training program after we finish those first 4 weeks is what we call Module 2. I guess bonus points to anyone who thinks of a really catchy title for this module. We are going to have 12 two-hour sessions. As I mentioned, that first hour is really for lecture, introducing the concepts and how it applies to the New Jersey data. And then that second is for the project work. Some of the topics that we will discuss is we'll start with project scoping, we'll go into record linkage, cross-sectional and cohort analysis, measurement, missingness and inference, and so much more. The intention here is to walk through the product or the project development lifecycle from project scoping all the way to visualization and communicating results methodically and in an applied manner to the New Jersey data at a pace where then you can continuously apply these concepts to your specific projects. Some of the class dates. So we have a few different opportunities here. So we're fortunate enough to have 4 fully subsidized classes, meaning that you do not need to you don't need to pay any additional money to take the class or participate. But so we have 2 classes that are starting June 10th, and then you could think about classes 3 and 4 starting about a month after. We have classes 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4 stacked. But the way that we're going to approach it is based off of your time zone. We'll either slot you into the morning or the afternoon class within these opportunities, and we'll ask as part of the application that you denote your preferences. This is just a brief overview on this table on the website that advertises this training, which we'll put in the chat shortly, so you can click around and you have for your own reference. There's more information about those specific class dates. So you can just make sure that you have full coverage. You might be wondering, well, who can apply? Teams of 4 to 6 are encouraged to apply. I would just mention, if you are thinking about applying as solo or you have a bit of a smaller team, we are open to exceptions to this rule. We'll include our training email at the end, and we are more than happy to play matchmaker, if you will, where necessary, to make sure that we can include everyone that's eligible for this training. We want it to be open for any and all. And I see, thanks Mia, the link to the class or to the website page about the class is now in the chat if you'd like to click along, and all this information is on there as well. But primarily, we're hoping that folks apply in teams of 4 to 6. Within that 4 to 6, we want these project teams to mirror what like a project team might otherwise look like. So there are going to be some folks that have programming skills, some folks that are familiar with the policy and what that policy implementation looks like and some of the key questions, some folks that are familiar with the project scoping. And ideally, we'd like to feature participants on these teams from multiple agencies or partner organizations, just because the data infrastructure and the data questions that we have are really cross-cutting across a lot of different agencies. So we want to make sure that the partners are in the room to be able to address these questions, exchange those ideas, and perhaps most importantly, potentially carry out this work beyond the scope of the trainings. We will give priority to teams that apply with a designated team lead. This is a little different for those that are familiar with our applied data analytics training programs. This is a little bit of a different approach than what we've had in the past. So in the past, we've made sure we separately supply team leads that kind of provide guardrails and then almost coach, sort of team by team, coach the teams through the project development lifecycle. Here, what we are asking, or what we're going to try out, is that if teams have a designated team lead in mind that is either internal or otherwise embedded within the work, we encourage you to apply with a designated team lead. We feel, or our theory here is that having a team lead that's already embedded within your all's work systems may lead, or our hypothesis is that it will lead to higher degrees of uptake of the projects of the work beyond just the scope of this training, because of course we're here advertising this training, but our real intention with all this work is so that it's carried out beyond the scope of 2025. And so as some of the skills that are required of a team lead is that we ask that they're comfortable scoping research projects within this domain, providing programming support. You don't need to be an expert in R and SQL, but you just need to be comfortable working with the participants and being a second set of eyes on the code, being able to work together with some of the other team leads on being able to, okay, here are some good resources that you can go to, and we'll have some Coleridge personnel also floating from team to team so we can more directly help with that. But we just ask that the team lead has some hands-on coding experience so that they can help be the first line of defense on debugging. We also asked that, of course, the team lead is capable or has some sort of agency is embedded within the work to be able to drive the team project beyond the completion of this training. Of course, if there's interest from leadership, so that's the little asterisk there, and you deem it worthwhile continuing the work. But we just want to make sure that there's that potential from the start. I just wanted to mention at the bottom there that the team lead does not count as one of the team members of one of these 4 to 6. So you could, in theory, apply with 7 with 1 designated as the team lead, but they will be treated differently throughout the training because they will be in charge of really overseeing, guiding the project, but may not be as involved in that hands-on implementation. Well, so what is required to apply? We just discussed who is eligible to apply, or and some of the requirements and preferences that we have. So what is required to apply? And Mia, if I can trouble you to put the application link in the chat, we'll have it on the next slide as well, just so folks can pull it up if they're interested. Thank you. So we'll ask that you suggest or you select the session that you're interested in or indicate no preference. You can either select classes 1 and 2 or classes 3 and 4. You don't need to distinguish early, after, morning, afternoon, or anything like that. We just need to know the dates that work best for you. And if you have no preference, that's totally okay too. What we'll ask is for each member of the team, and this is really helpful for us, is to provide a recent resume or CV. It does not need to be perfect, but it's just helpful to understand organization, some of your skills, your position, and your responsibilities. And then we want a statement, a personal statement on how participation supports professional development, and then a statement from the supervisor describing how participation will support the organization, both in the near term and the long-term future, and also confirming that the participant will be able to dedicate sufficient time to the training. In terms of time, time expectations for the training, we say no more than 2 to 4 hours a week. It depends on the week, but really I would say aim for that 4 hours a week. That's our max that we provide in terms of our homework, and our time expectations are all built around that maximum of 4 hours a week. And that includes not just our homework and the class time, but then also any time devoted to the project, because we want to make sure that this is manageable within the context of the rest of your work responsibilities. If your team decides to apply with a team lead, we ask that that the team lead provides a recent resume or CV, and then a personal statement. We don't require any additional supervisor statement for the team lead, but really that personal statement is important so we can get the context of why they feel that they're a good fit as a team lead. I just want to highlight that bottom bullet. You do not need separate access, and you're not expected to come to the training with access to your own K-12 post-secondary and workforce data. The intention for this training is to use the New Jersey data for every single team, regardless of what state you're working with. What we do at the end of the training is we provide an opportunity to export any code from our secure environment, or if you're already working inside the administrative data research facility, you can export it and then re-import it or ingest it into another workspace if you'd like, so that you have code that is self-sustaining beyond the scope of this specific training. But we don't require, and we ask that you don't plan on bringing your own data to bear, of course, unless you're in New Jersey, and then you'll be working with your own data. In terms of some deadlines, so applications are due roughly a month from now, by May 28th. If you're having trouble meeting those deadlines, please email us. That email will be in on the next or 2 slides from now. And we have the link to the applications that's already in the chat. That's where we take all applications. If you're having any trouble accessing the SurveyMonkey link or anything like that, I'll just mention in a second who you can email with any concerns. In terms of just other resources, if you're curious reading more about our applied data analytics training programs, the history behind them, and some of the domains that we've worked with in the past, actually also some of the past class projects that we've highlighted on there, we've got a link on the slide deck. Again, the slide deck will be disseminated out accordingly after this webinar call, and then a link to the ADRF, that's our administrative data research facility. That's again our secure research environments, cloud-based research environments. With that, I think we can wrap up at least the presentation and head over to the Q&A. Give you all a few minutes. If you want to type your questions in the Q&A, we'll go one by one and do our best to answer those. But if you have any questions that come up after this webinar, that is totally okay. I have been there, I understand. Please email us at training@coleridgeinitiative.org. And Mia, thank you. Mia already beat me to it and put that in the chat. So if you have any questions at all, please email us at training@coleridgeinitiative.org, whether that's questions about your team composition, questions about about the team lead, about the requirements for the team lead and what we're looking for there. Other questions just about the focus of the training, the topics that are going to be covered, questions around some of the dates and time expectations if you want us to reiterate anything, and also questions or comments if you're having any trouble accessing the survey, please let us know. And again, if you're going to apply as an individual or as a group of participants that's less than 4, we just ask that you reach out beforehand, because there might be some matchmaking that we can do to build out a larger team. With that, I'll say thank you all for listening to me. I'll stop the sharing, or I guess I'll keep this slide up and we can shift to the Q&A portion of the session here. And what I'll do is I'll read all the Q&A questions out loud, and then we'll go one by one through them and answer them. And please continue to keep them coming in the chat here. So there is a comment, given the student level portal for understanding FAFSA completion outcomes, I wonder if there's potential tie-in for post-secondary outcomes in the same portal, kind of like Michigan has. And there's a link to a portal that I can also just put in the chat for those that are having trouble or can't access the Q&A. Nate, I don't know if you have any follow-up comments on that.
Yeah, I think might need to kick this to Stephanie, but I mean, let me back up just high level of thinking through some of the intent of the trainings. The intent of the trainings is precisely getting at sort of Bill's question here, right? Is that a lot of what we're trying to do is articulate the art of the possible a little bit, right? And the way you can do that is being hands-on data, seeing where the opportunities lie, getting some first stage evidence builds, first stage analytics, and then taking this back to your agencies. And we also, help inform for the projects. New Jersey's pathways, we've seen this be successful in other states that have contributed data, where you think about the continuum from raw data all the way to evidence-based policymaking, and what information we are able to get to people that need to make decisions. And in that process, it's not just about integrating the data, but it's improving that data infrastructure, augmenting that data infrastructure, having that data talk to each other better, then supporting different questions so that you essentially, no matter what question you have, you come in and you have that infrastructure there. And then it's a question of, well, what products do we start to think about and integrate so that decision making is easier, and what does that modality look like for accessing that information? And these are all things that have been developed through the front end of having training curriculum, where you're able to have lots of people come in, experience and work with the data, provide not only answers to questions, but what are next steps? What are potentials here if we just added this? And so really the intent here is to kind of lay that foundation for making the case. And even if it's not with New Jersey, it might be with your state saying, well, hey, we were able to do this. If we can put these pieces together, we probably could push and address this public policy issue that we're confronting. So can't guarantee that that would happen with this class, but that certainly has happened with other classes we've done in other domains, where you see lots of downstream activities that really were kind of found that inception in the sandbox of the training.
Thanks, Nate. And I'll just add onto it, and I'll say that, and it's not on the slides here, and maybe it should be on the slides in future webinars, but our intention for you all as part of participants in an applied data analytics training program are to develop capacity, and capacity is defined broadly. It could be capacity in terms of data literacy, it could be programming, it could be exposure to different data infrastructure. It could just be capacity in answering questions that maybe you haven't had a chance to or the time to do so in the past. And then also developing new networks both within your team, especially if you're a cross-agency team, but then also networks across teams. You'll have the opportunity to hear about approaches to common data issues from other states, from other agencies, other partner organizations in the field. And then the third one, of course, is the intention to develop a sustainable data product or research paper, whatever it looks like and what's most impactful for your work. Thank you for the question. I'll move along to the next question, and it's around the time commitment. So is the time commitment or expectations the same across the whole team, including the team lead, if they're not including the count of the core team members? That's a great question. I'll say the time expectations are pretty similar for the team lead. For that foundations module pre-training, they may be able to take kind of a break. It's typically for those first 4 weeks, and I'll go back to that slide of the foundations pre-training. It's maximum 1 to 2 hours a week for everyone. I will say though, just in general, the time expectations, I think fair to be pretty similar for the team lead versus the participants. And just to echo what I said earlier, time expectations should be no more than 4 hours a week, including weeks that we have the class. I'll move on to the next question. And if I answer your question and I am misinterpreting your question, or if you'd like something else answered, please follow up in the Q&A, and I apologize in advance if that's ever the case. So the next question is, I saw that there are other trainings as well where there'll be webinars on those. That is a great question. We're in the process of overhauling our training schedule website. The K-12 portfolio is really it is where there are the most amount of training opportunities right now, especially in the next few months. But we will be releasing opportunities in some other domains in the next few months. If you're interested, please reach out to training@coleridgeinitiative.org. And Nate, I see you were going to come off mute there.
Yeah, we'll host webinars as those come. We're still, a big part of this, is you all could imagine, is making sure that we are working closely with the state providing the data and making sure the curriculum's in alignment with their initiatives and their priorities. We have 2 that are pending. One will focus on the educational workforce indicator framework. That's still a little TBD on when that will go live, and when we'll actually deploy the training. And the other one will be focused on prison education programs, prison education and training programs with a primary focus on higher education and correctional institutions and workforce outcomes. And again, that one's a little TBD. We're still in partnership and conversations with state to sort of, again, make sure we have proper access to data, making sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and we're in compliance. And the focus of the curriculum is serving the state's needs. But those should go live as far as a webinar and when the classes kick off sometime towards the end of the summer, if you want to kind of pencil that in. But yeah, if you want to be on our mailing list for these, as been posted, just email us at training@coleridgeinitiative.org, and we'll add you to the mailing list so that you make sure you're on the listserv when we do send out these opportunities, so you're notified.
Thanks, Nate. We can move on to the next question, which is, if we have access to our own integrated data warehouse, can we do the project based off on our own data instead of using the New Jersey Integrated Data System? So for our training programs, we ask that the class project is done on the New Jersey data. It will just make the from a legal process and how the data infrastructure is set up, and also for the training materials, they'll be more specific to the New Jersey data. It will just make things a bit more streamlined. That said, there is an opportunity to export any of the code out, and we want to make sure, as we're working through all of this, a lot of the conversations are also going to be around the data structure and the data models. We want to make sure that the ways that we are talking about that are not just applicable to New Jersey, but then also broadly applicable. So we'll do our best to distinguish through the training what is maybe a bit more New Jersey specific versus what you can expect if you're thinking about state administrative data systems writ large. And what we'll do is we'll do our absolute best in developing our training materials, which include some sample coding notebooks and tutorials to kind of get you started so that they are widely applicable. And then, of course, after the training, we'll make all of those open source. We post them on our publicly available and visible GitHub. And then we'll give you the opportunity to export any code that you might want to port over to your own data system as well. Nate, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would. We've tried this before, and it has traditionally not gone well. There are a host of, even if you have access to the data, there's a host of things that need to happen for the use case to be approved. I would just caution against considering that an option on the front end. These things do take time, and there's a whole around what it means to export out. But again, part of the reason why we're able to subsidize the training seats is, and why New Jersey is providing data is because of the benefits to the system writ large, and that New Jersey is providing their data so that folks work on it. So they are getting benefit out of folks identifying potential issues with the data, helping with the infrastructure, and again providing pilot projects. But as Ben said, that there's always these opportunities to be able to export your code, and a way to kind of get at this is thinking about your state's context, your state's policy questions, and that should help guide the project that you do and execute with New Jersey data. But then when we export the code, you should be able to run that on your data once out. So obviously with slight modifications based on structure and standardization.
Thanks, Nate. And the individual who asked the question followed up and just said thank you. And so I will just mark that as done. And then we've got one last, at least outstanding question. And please, we've got plenty of time. If you have other questions, we're happy to stay on. We'll keep them coming in the Q&A chat here. But the final question that we have, at least as of now, is if we are coming from a state that does not have data linkage and infrastructure for this, do you talk about how to move forward after the class? So I guess, Nate, how or what's the value add for teams coming from states that may not have the same level of data infrastructure as the New Jersey statewide data system?
Yeah, I can use a couple of examples here without naming states specifically, but consider the class almost if you are starting where you don't have an integrated data system. There hasn't been much movement on cross-agency conversations to create the will, so to speak, of affording that integrated data system and breaking down silos cross-agency. Is the trainings themselves are a way to sort of demonstrate the art of the possible. And a lot of times to move those conversations along, and I'm using the narrative from states that we've worked with where this is sort of how it shook out, was they took part in initial trainings and they demonstrated like, look, we were able to do this project with another state's data because they had the system integrated where they could follow individuals from post-secondary to workforce and talk about workforce outcomes, talk about what it looked like to have cross-state attrition when you graduated a ton of people from a program at a university where most of their graduates went to another state to work. And they were able to make the case that because of the work they did in the training, because of the interim sort of project they did, that could only happen from the integrated data, that helped stimulate the conversations across agency because there was a clear value proposition. And they tagged that to the concerns in their states about economic development, about workforce development, about education and training. And they found pathways that that met agencies where they were at their greatest need and concerns from a policy perspective, so that the only way to answer those cohesively was to find the commonality across those agencies, so the barriers and the silos sort of kind of dissolved away, and they could start the conversation of not necessarily is this possible or what is the value, but we know what the value is. And now it's a question about how do we minimize and reduce the barriers. And Coleridge, some of our partner organizations like DISC, like the Multi-State Data Collaborative, we're here to help with those conversations and what it takes to move the needle on integrated data. So I would encourage you that if the concern is, well, maybe this isn't for me because we wouldn't be able to replicate this work right away, but it could be, it probably is for you though, because there is a precursor to being able to do that work, and that's having those conversations with decision makers, data stewards about the value of this work. And we've had plenty of states where we've continued to partner with after training where they had participants come and they were like, hey, can you help us with some of these conversations? Because we want to get the agencies on board to start thinking about the integrated data. And I'll make one final point here. And again, not to politicize things talk, but we are in a different reality where a lot of data systems we're relying on from federal government may not last forever. And there are real conversations about what gaps states can start to fill here. And the only way that happens if they have an integrated data system where they can start to generate some of these measures and outcomes that we've been relying on the federal government for ages to do for us. Now, and they were using state level data. They were just integrating in with other systems. So if the writing on the wall suggests that states are going to receive block grants and things like that, now's the time to make those arguments to state decision makers about the value of integrated data. And again, having a value proposition from something like a training where you have a pilot project is a helpful way to do that.
Thanks, Nate. And there was a comment actually that came in that is echoing a lot of what Nate said. I'll just read it aloud. It says some of the value may be showing results in a way to help make the argument for why your agency or state needs one. And I'll just add on to everything that Nate was saying and just clarify, I think, one of my comments earlier around the intention of the team projects. Success and driving the work forward can look differently for every single organization, look different for every agency, can look different for every state. It might success and driving the work forward might be additional conversations with new stakeholders around the potential for an expanded data infrastructure or for expanded linkages. Success might be, carrying out the same work on your existing data infrastructure. There are a bunch of different ways we can think and characterize success and what it means for carrying out the work and in a sustainable fashion beyond the scope of the training. And so so it's not, we understand that it's not a one size fits all. And I think in the perfect world, to be completely honest, Nate, if you don't mind me saying this, I think we'd love to have participants from different states and agencies that are in different situations when it comes to data sharing, because that helps promote the exchange of ideas and approaches where we can really leverage some of those network effects of just being all together in the same room.
I don't mind you saying that at all, Ben. And I think it is important to articulate that the goals of the training can be different based on the team where you're at. The point of the training is to meet folks where they are through a demonstration project. And that can mean very different things for folks. I mean, the core work is that, yes, we want to understand what it's like to utilize this data, to ask a question, to answer it. And you're not writing a dissertation. That's not the intent here. But there are findings that are surprising. There are questions that we didn't think of that states come with that are like, that's a great question. And that's incredibly important. So it's not just about the nuts and bolts of learning how to do data science and asking and answering a research question. It's also understanding, and we do this in the curriculum, it's also understanding all of the pieces that need to come into place for this thing to even exist, and then how to create that throughput. And this is why I go back to the team lead things, with why we really want folks to bring a team lead with them. Because in an ideal world, our policy questions and our people and our data necessarily cross agency boundaries, state boundaries, but our systems necessarily don't. And if we want to move the needle on solving some of our more complex policy problems, our data needs to do that, and so do the people that are working in the agencies. We need to facilitate that cross-agency work a little bit better, and the trainings are a way to achieve that. And so there's lots of goals that we're trying to attend to here, underlying that main goal of let's demonstrate the value from an integrated data system, but also help you understand how to get there if you're not, how to move the needle if you are, but you need to add, and then ultimately how to institutionalize cross-agency work on common policy problems.
Great, thanks, Nate. There's another question that came in the chat, and Nate, Stephanie, I will defer to you all on this question, so I'll read it aloud. Is this based on data submitted to the state or using real-time data?
If I'll let Stephanie answer, but I just want to clarify. I'm assuming that this is, whether this is coming from like SIS or like student information systems or learning management systems that typically are doing some sort of daily reporting. This would be the administrative data that's reported to the state. And Stephanie, feel free to jump in if I'm mischaracterizing anything.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's you know, the New Jersey Statewide Data System is kind of the intermediary of the state agency's data. So school districts reported up to the New Jersey Department of Education, who then sends extracts to the New Jersey Statewide Data System. So unfortunately, one of the limitations of that process is that real time to us is like a year in the past. So we'll have K through 12 data up through the 23-24 school year in the.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Nate. Well, we can give, there's another comment or question in the chat, and please continue to keep them coming. We've got 10 minutes left here, and we can always follow up as the slide share says over here. So I'll read this comment or question aloud. Can you offer any advice on actually accessing SLDS in practical ways, just like it doesn't take extremely long periods of time to process approved complete requests for a backbone organization who already has individual student level data with a focus on improving student outcomes? A future goal of ours is to clearly link educational and adjacent systemic factors to economic mobility, which will require administrative and workforce data that can be linked at the individual level through and beyond individuals' post K-12 journeys. Nate, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I can. Pedro, that's a really great question, by the way. And I'm going to be careful here because this is not a sales call. All right. So we're a nonprofit, but going back to the way that why we're able to host the trainings with micro level data is because of the Administrative Data Research Facility, the ADRF. And that's sort of the facilitating platform, the mechanism by which we're able to integrate data. And we are not trying to supplant SLDS systems at all. We are trying to augment and enhance their capability and use, right? And so in that respect, sometimes what we are is a neutral third party that helps with compliance governance, and safety and security of data, right? And so we have worked with states before where, again, going back to the earlier question, they don't have an integrated data system, nor do they have an agency for which it's built for that system to live. So what we're able to provide is a neutral third party. Let's say you have 3 agencies sending data in, workforce, K-12, and postsec, okay? Your sort of core components of an SLDS. Well, let's say we have a state where those 3 agencies can't agree on where it would live. They don't have a separate sort of authoritative organization that sort of runs and manages it. Well, what we've done with some states is we help do that with them, where we're a neutral third party. That data comes in, but it actually lives separate from each other. It doesn't touch each other until all 3 data stewards say, we want this thing done for this purpose, and these people can have access to it. And we help with that compliance and the way that access is operationalized, so that they say we want to link these 3 data systems for this specific use for these specific people. And only then, after all the legal and the governance framework is in place, do we create that workspace where those 3 agencies' data is brought together. And that's how we help the access modality, right? Because even SLDS systems, even if they are built and integrated and they have an organization that can bring and integrate them, they're not always built to create external access or even internal access across agencies. And so in those cases, we tend to replicate what they've built, and then we handle the access modality for them on an approved use case with proper governance, proper legal agreements in place. And so really the ADRF, we've designed it in such a way that it's adaptable to various state contexts, but always foundational to the governance and legal arrangements that are required and how we operationalize safe, secure use of data and compliance more generally. I hope that was helpful. If there's a follow-up, Pedro, feel free to put something in, or you can just email us and we can talk more.
Great, thanks, Nate. Well, I'll just mention that we'll stick around. We'll give folks about a 2-minute buffer here if just to continue typing out in the chat. Hopefully 2 minutes is long enough. But please feel free to keep the questions coming. Again, if other questions come up afterwards, we already put the link in the chat, but please email us at training@coleridgeinitiative.org. If you are familiar with or reach out to me or Nate or Stephanie in the past, you can always, you can reach out to me, Nate, personally, but your fastest answer will be training@coleridgeinitiative.org, because there's a larger group that has access to it.
Pedro, you're welcome. I meant to type it, but accidentally hit answer live. So you're welcome. Excellent. Yeah, well, we'll hang out. But thank you all for attending. And look, if you guys are like, this is really interesting, maybe not the right fit, feel free to send to your colleagues. We do have quite a few available slots, and we want to make sure we fill them with folks that are, going to benefit from the opportunity. Excellent. Thank you all.
Thanks, Nate. I think we'll give folks about another 30 seconds in case there were other questions in the Q&A that are still coming in. Oh, there is a question. Nate, you want to take this one? Is this opportunity open to high school students?
I have to say that's not a question I've thought about before. They would have to at least be 18. I know that, because they would need to sign the NDA to access the micro level data. Like all of our decisions with how we handle the applicant pool, it would depend on qualifications and sort of the statement of value that they would get out of the class. But I wouldn't off the cuff say they couldn't apply if they were embedded within a team. But they would need to at least be 18.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And I'll just add along that the curriculum, not that this is meant to be restrictive in any way, the curriculum has been designed for largely state government agency employees within specific realms that that the K-12 project pertains to. And of course, partnering organizations. Alrighty, any other questions?
Perfect. Call to wrap.